So we are heading into our next session. We're going to jump right in. I see you guys all in the chat chatting it up. So let's take advantage of the time. Very excited to welcome Jennifer Brisman from Vow Digital Health to the stage. Jennifer, hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. I know you have a lot going on, but we're really excited that you took some time to join us today. We had some interactive sessions yesterday on Zoom with event planners talking about this idea of going back to in-person events, and it can be very overwhelming.
Sure. Yeah.
A lot of questions around how do we do this and what does it look like and how do we know that vaccine cards are legit and what do we do?
Sure.
And I was really kind of course, listening, thinking, well, we have this great session coming up tomorrow where we get to talk a little more about it. But first, can you just tell us a little bit about you and Vow and, give a little context for people? Because I'm
I'd
sure we have
love
a ton of
to.
questions.
Thank you. So thank you for allowing me to join you guys today. So Vow is a tech company that was conceived many years before Vow Digital Health, as you know it today, came along. Vow is a company that at its heart is committed to the future of tech and the future of work for event, meeting, and hospitality professionals. So there was nothing that I personally, as an event producer of 20 years, had more conviction about than helping really an entire ecosystem that I'm really passionate about get back to live experiences. Obviously, with the pandemic, none of us ever thought that this would go on as long as it did. Yeah. And we really came forward with what I think is the only professional tool that COVID clears at scale, and truly the right professional tool for event, meeting, hospitality pros, and certainly everybody touching the space. We have morphed it and sort of refashioned it for workplaces because we are the only professional platform and we have some great areas where we're disrupting. But our goal is to really champion gatherings. Gatherings are the fabric of our lives, and we have to get back to doing that. Gathering is what drives the most important moments in life, and deals and deal making and profitability and revenue in a way that, virtual experiences are a little bit more challenged in doing. We've gotten more comfortable with it, but especially where big deals are in place. People want to meet face to face. They want to know what you're about. They want to have that connective tissue, and supporting that is what we're all about.
Yeah, that's great. I think even a total introvert like me, I'm dying to get back to in-person and seeing people. And it came up a lot in the conversations yesterday, this idea that, we would love to get back, but we want to make sure that we're doing it in a safe way. And Adrian Seeger brought up a very good point, which I completely agree with. It's our duty of care to make sure that if we're bringing back in-person events, we do it in a way that works and makes sense. I do see already, we probably are going to get a ton of questions. So if you have questions and you're watching live, please put them in the questions tab so we can try to grab them. But can you tell us a little bit about how this works on site?
Sure.
And what this looks like for an event planner?
Sure. So we really try to do very little on site. We COVID clear in advance. Nobody wants to go to a COVID event. You want to go to an event. And so whether it's proof of vaccine or a test as proof of negative for COVID, or whether it's proof of vaccine and a test, our professional app starts from a place of trust. It's a B2B platform. So we start with a reg list, an attendee list, a network list, an employee list, a member list. We start from a place of trust, and that's with some type of ecosystem. Could be an event organizer and the list of attendees for a corporate, social, or a fundraising event. It could be a social event like a concert or a wedding. So we start from a place of trust, and every guest or employee comes through the app. They go ahead and create an account. They go ahead and consent. They upload an ID, and then they upload the required health credential, whether it's a vaccine, a test, or both. We check it. We have a combination of tech and talent that does it. And then we go ahead and clear it. We give them a pass. And we have a lot of gated points along the way to really protect people's data privacy and security. And we have a really specific posture around not keeping more than we need, and really purging that data as soon as it's been used for the purpose with which it's intended. So we really are a professional platform for this. We have no consumer-facing capabilities today, nor do we want to, and that's very important to us. So that's what the platform does today. And I think what's vital about it is nobody in their right mind thinks that there's a silver bullet to warding off COVID when you gather, right? It's about reputational risk and then your own personal risk threshold. So when you gather, whether with your friends, at a restaurant, whether at a large event or a concert, you're really thinking about, first and foremost, your own professional risk. What are you comfortable with? And a lot of that is based on what's happening around you. So when you want to drive revenue, when you want to put butts in seats, COVID clearance in advance of a live experience is the best way to do that. And when you're looking at a framework for that, you're looking at three things today. You're looking at screening for proof of negative for COVID, whether that is proof of vaccine or whether that is proof of negative for COVID by way of a COVID PCR test or a rapid antigen test. Then you're looking at the testing itself. And then third of all, you're looking at sanitization. And those are the three tools we have at our disposal, as well as masks and social distancing. Mm-hmm. So most event organizers are looking at the operations of an event, the goals of that event, and then the risk profile of both whoever is championing it and paying for it, and then the event goers. And so we're looking at this framework and saying, boom, that's what it is. That's what's going to be the most reasonable approach to put butts in seats. And we think that's enough of sort of a framework to ensure that people go, that they're comfortable, but not compromise the reason that we're there. So it's a really exciting time to be at the epicenter of that. It's what we do well. So as much as we love our tech, what we're providing that we think is indispensable to people is leadership. Leadership around COVID and certainly leadership around event operations. So.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Someone yesterday was saying they work with I think it's a national bowling organization. And, you can't replace that virtually nearly the same.
Sure.
And so there was just talk around like talking to the members about what their threshold was. And I think that's a very important piece is understanding, is this something that our members, what would it take for them to feel comfortable coming?
Sure.
And I think that's an important piece. Sina is asking, how do you validate the submitted certificate? This is something I knew was going to come up. Everything they're submitting, how do you make sure it's not fake?
Sure, understood. So there's no one in the world that can tell you whether something is fake or not. And anybody who says they can absolutely doesn't understand the landscape. Part of the reason we in the United States have had such a hard time with the idea of a vaccine passport is just that. Certainly there are certain entities, government or otherwise, that have come forward that have the necessary layers to check with your healthcare provider, to check with your healthcare institution. But today the card is certainly from a governance perspective, what governs that. But everyone's swimming in the same pool. We are not a vaccine passport and we don't play one on TV. We also don't share our data. So we're not in the same space as vaccine passports. But as they come forward in more volume, we will certainly work with them. What we really are doing is, one, starting from a place of trust. And then number two, when someone's coming through our app, whether they're an event goer, whether they're an employee, we're looking at their ID as a reference point, as well as their information through their employer or their information through a list, be it a registration list, a guest list, a management list. We're looking at the information across all formats. So who they are in their identity, what is on their vaccine credential, what is on a health credential like a test. But the person coming through our app is actually in a bit of an agreement with our app saying that their information is lawful, complete, and accurate. So it's a little bit like the waivers that people have, people sign when they come to events, or those attestations, the individual, the guest, or the employee saying, this is my information. It's real, it's authentic, it's accurate. And then for us, again, it starts from a place of trust. So it's the same information that they would present when they come on site. So we simply have our own business practices and processes and what the minimum requirements we have that we use to clear a guest. But we are a business product and we are not, in fact, a vaccine passport.
There's a big difference.
Big difference, absolutely. And listen, for those who are in fact vaccine passports, they have a business process as well. They have a business process of what they look like, what they use, and what they do. And that's really why we've had a very difficult time in the United States with adoption, because so many forces have come forward to profess themselves a vaccine passport or a place in an app where you store your vaccine. And then you can use that to demonstrate proof of vaccine as you go to enter anything, a workplace, a venue, or vendor. So we don't position ourselves that way, because that's not who we are. We have a business process to essentially create a safe and secure way to gather proof of negative for COVID, be it a vaccine or a test, for experience of scale, whether a workplace gathering or a unique one-time gathering like a live event.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what's can be so frustrating, is that, the information is changing constantly.
Yes.
There's no one body that's saying this is what everyone should be doing.
Yes.
And, the idea of a vaccine passport, maybe you can be verified in a more detailed way, and then use it elsewhere. But there's such a small percentage of people who are willing to even have one of those or even know about them. Now, one question that came up a lot yesterday was around this idea of the time, right? So you take a PCR test, let's just say, and then you go to a party that night, and then you want to come to my event the next day. So how time sensitive does this have to be? Or does that also kind of fit into the event organizers and what they feel makes sense?
I'm not a population health expert. So when we make recommendations, we look at all the tools available, one of which is testing. And the timing is what matters in testing. With proof of vaccination, timing isn't an issue. Yes, ideally we want proof of vaccination completed within 14 days of a live experience, but even that's changing. Some groups are accepting one vaccine. Some groups are accepting different types of vaccines. Yeah. But when you look at testing is tied to timing. And so when we make recommendations to our clients, what we look at is compliance and efficacy. You can request any test in the world, and you can tell a live group, like, everyone's going to have to do a PCR, everyone's going to have to do a day of or day before rapid antigen. But if people don't comply, it's meaningless. Right. So you first have to have a stance that your guest or employees can't do X unless they comply. So you first have to have that value proposition. And then you have to look at the experience and say, what makes sense for the experience? When you have 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people descending on an event, if it is a private event, there's a contract holder, it's a bank, a financial institution, anyone, asking people to get a rapid antigen day of or day before can be tricky. It can be tricky, and you don't really leave them with a recourse if they can't get it done or if something goes awry. So you have to look at the testing and what you need from the testing related to the type of event. So also, for example, rapid antigens are not as prolific these days as the PCRs and the rapid PCRs. So when someone can do a PCR, theoretically within a 3-day window of that experience, it's vital. So I think, part of it is, how do you get compliance, but what is your purpose for doing it? Whether or not someone gets a rapid antigen, whether or not someone gets a PCR, there's different pros and cons from a population health perspective. And while I wouldn't comment on that, what we look at it is from operations. What makes sense to get the majority of the group to comply? Where are they relative to testing? What time of day is the event happening? If an event is on a Monday at 8 a.m. in the morning, asking people to get a rapid antigen is nonsensical. Where are they going to get it on a Monday morning? Are there enough healthcare providers, urgent cares, pharmacies, facilities open on a Sunday? So we really look at the framework around compliance and how do we get what we need to have a healthy and safe experience and put butts in seats.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Something that you mentioned briefly that I want to make sure we address is the idea of there's your event attendees, and then there's everyone who's working the event, the employees, the venue staff, et cetera. And so I just want to kind of point out that that's something that we should be thinking about. Yeah. You could have all of your attendees cleared and then have all of that kind of, and that was brought up yesterday as well. Do you see that event organizers are thinking about that?
I don't even know what to say. Every single one of our event organizers is doing it. I've yet to do an event where staff were not screened. It doesn't happen. An event is only as safe as everyone touching it. Now, there's client-facing vendors or event-facing vendors, and then there's vendors where, and I don't love the word vendors, but let's call them partners and collaborators, where partners and collaborators are coming on site. Maybe they're loading in a tent for 10 days, for 20 days, if they're loading in 50,000 square feet of tending for a festival, and then they're going. And then you have techs that are on site. Anybody that's client-facing should have some type of screening, right? And if proof of vaccine is sufficient for guests, oftentimes that is sufficient for our partners and our collaborators. I've yet to see an event come through our platform that isn't touching the venues, the vendors, and the collaborators. Everybody is opting in. Everybody is agreeing to be screened. There are just certain ones that make more sense than other. And if you are a business that has to bear the expense of testing, let's say, for your cruise, you kind of only want to bear that expense or be asked to bear that expense if those crews are, like I said, customer facing in any way. Some businesses are doing it to really make sure they're safe interacting with each other when they come on site in large groups. But it's tough. Listen, the largest caterers have it really, really tough. They're extremely client facing. So they're extremely diligent. They have to balance being short staffed oftentimes, asking heroic things of their staff, really thinking about, well, if they're loading in at 5, 6 a.m. in the morning, sometimes they don't know their staff to the 11th hour. So they have it the most challenging, and they are doing it, and they're championing it, and they're heroes. So we're not seeing anything but that.
That's great. I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, obviously there's the event side of this. And then there are places like New York City where you're required to show vaccine proof to go to a restaurant or any kind of entertainment venue. Are you seeing the rollout of this more widely where, obviously they can't do it as far in advance, right? How is this working with businesses?
Sure. Great question. So we are not a bus, we're a car. So we're not a platform where people get off and on. We're not consumer facing. So sure. While I would say maybe we're not the perfect fit for a restaurant where you have a ton of walk-ins, all the restaurants that have private rooms have, of course, all been in touch with us. But what New York City is doing is amazing. And they're really making sure that New Yorkers get back to doing the things they love and being the capital of the world indirectly. All the theaters are being so diligent about requiring proof of vaccine and IDs. We're doing a lot of the opening parties where people are doing additional layers of screening. We do have a feature coming in the app, which would allow us to COVID clear, but also allow that same guest to have on their phone, in their app, proof of vaccine and ID, so that they don't have to be card-carrying members and they don't have to bring those assets with them, those valuable assets. Nobody wants to go to a black tie gala and carry their vaccine card and worry that they drop it in the bathroom. So we do have some great features for that, but we're swimming in the same pool as everybody else, and we're learning on the fly, and we're pivoting, where we see a need in mass. But yes, a lot of states are requiring proof of vaccine. So we've been unusually busy, and we're just trying to have everybody's backs and take it all in stride.
Yeah, I'm sure it's been an incredibly crazy time for you as you evolve and build and market and all of that.
Yeah.
I do see a question from Peggy Lamberton. Hi, Peggy. She wants to know if you can discuss the different kinds of event planner certifications for on-site COVID prevention. Do you know much? I don't know how connected you are to that.
Yeah, it's not my area of expertise, but under the sort of duty of care, you have CCHOs and you have chief compliance officers. They both provide a critical role when you're gathering in mass. And certainly they can provide even a bigger framework, whether it is what happens if you're doing on-site testing and someone does test positive, whether it's, just basic screening of guests day to day, temperature checks. There's other layers that can get added in. And I think that when you have a group that has a very low threshold for reputational and real health risk, firing up a chief compliance officer or a chief compliance hospitality officer is really great and can only help you.
Yeah, the more we can all learn about this and stay on top of it, the better for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
And to your point, every organization has a different risk threshold, different guidelines, different abilities to do things. Like you said, if it's a Monday morning meeting at 8 o'clock, there are
yeah.
limitations around that. Um, we are running out of time, but I want to give you an opportunity. So Vow is not an official sponsor of this event, so there's no real place on our platform to learn about Vow. So if someone wanted to learn more or talk to you, I know you have a personal profile in the system, but if people want to chat with you, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, they can go to vowdigitalhealth.com. It's the quickest way if they have like an actual inquiry and a need for the product and they want to get calendared the quickest. They can email Jennifer at vow.app, and they can get to us as well. It's a little bit of a slower time, but we're really trying to have the backs of every organizer. It's not a perfect world, and we are evolving every day. But we are trying to make sure that events of scale do get back safely. And they're able to lean into all the different tools, of which we are one, to make sure that happens. If you skip this year or you just go virtual, it's even harder to come back in the future. So we're really making sure that our customers know all the tools that are available and how to assemble them in the right way with the right budget so they can get back to these live experiences that are so dear to us.
Perfect. Well, I thank you so much for joining. I think
Thank you.
we wanted to have you to talk about the topic. I think it's so important. So thank you for taking the time today.
Thank you so much for having me.